My husband was toasting his victory with a bottle of vintage scotch he believed he now owned, smiling into the amber like it was the sun he had finally captured. I could hear the clink of ice through the security audio on my phone, even though I was sitting outside my own gate in Brickell, my car idling, my hands perfectly still on the wheel. The house lights were on. They shouldn't have been. I had left before dawn for a crisis call, the kind that makes you forget breakfast and time zones. I'd locked the front door with my thumbprint and watched the deadbolt slide home. The silence at 6 a.m. usually felt like a sanctuary. Tonight, that same house felt like a crime scene that hadn't decided what kind of body it wanted. On my screen, Malcolm stood in my living room, shoulders loose, posture relaxed in a way he never managed around my conference table. He wore the tuxedo I bought him for a charity gala he refused to attend because he said my donors were snobs. Now he looked like he belonged to someone else's celebration. And sitting in my chair, my leather chair, the one I picked because it doesn't squeak during negotiations, was a young woman with glossy hair and a smile that knew exactly what it was doing. She had one leg draped over the other like a headline. On her wrist, catching the chandelier light, was a diamond tennis bracelet. My tennis bracelet? The one Malcolm told me he had taken in for repairs 3 weeks ago. The camera caught her turning her wrist, enjoying the way the stones answered the light. She laughed at something Malcolm said, and it was the kind of laugh you hear right before someone wipes their lipstick and says, "He chose me." Malcolm raised his glass to the phone propped on a stack of books. "Cheers," he said, voice thick with performance. "To fresh starts. To new energy. To finally getting what I deserve." He didn't know I was listening. Or maybe he did, and he just believed I was too late to matter. The street outside my gate was calm, Miami calm, humid, glossy, indifferent. The skyline behind me glittered like a row of expensive teeth. A yacht horn sounded somewhere out on the water, and for a moment it felt like the city was laughing with him. My phone buzzed, a text from Malcolm. "Don't forget the deadline. 7 p.m. Keep it clean. Clean." That word made me smile, just a little. Not because it was funny, because it was revealing. Malcolm loved words that made him feel like a man in control, clean, fair, civil. He didn't realize those were costumes. He could wear them for an hour, maybe 2, but sweat always seeped through. I opened the attachment he'd emailed earlier that morning. 3 documents, a settlement agreement, a deed transfer intent, and an immediate possession notice typed in bold like font size could turn delusion into law. I scrolled slowly. I've spent my adult life reading the fine print people hoped I'd miss: contracts, disclosures, crisis statements, confessions disguised as apologies. Malcolm's paperwork had that same cheap smell, even through the screen. House. Lake house. Half my company's future earnings. My vehicles, my jewelry, anything that glittered. Then, tucked into a paragraph like a careless fingerprint, I saw the name that made my stomach go cold. Pierce Family Trust. Not my name. Not Malcolm's. The trust. The thing my father insisted on years before Malcolm ever learned how to knot a tie. The thing Malcolm signed papers acknowledging. The thing he complained about for weeks because it meant his name would never be on the deed, no matter how many times he called it our home. I stared at that line until it stopped being ink and started being truth. He was forcing me to sign away property I did not personally own, which meant 2 things. 1, the document was a dud. A pretty piece of paper that couldn't move a single brick. 2, if Malcolm used it, filed it, tried to sell my house, tried to threaten my clients with it, he wasn't just being petty. He was stepping into fraud. I've spent years walking into rooms where men smile like they're holding knives. In my firm, we call it pre-crisis. The moment before someone realizes their secret is exposed. You don't scream in pre-crisis. You document. You breathe. You let the other person talk until they hand you the truth in their own voice. Malcolm had always mistaken my quiet for softness. That mistake was about to cost him everything. I was done paying for his illusions. Inside the house, Malcolm leaned down and kissed the girl's shoulder. She smiled, satisfied, like she had won something she didn't understand. He lifted his phone again, turning it toward the room, giving his followers a slow tour of what he believed was his new kingdom. "Look at this place," he said. "All mine now, signed and sealed." Signed. He said it with such certainty that I almost admired the audacity. I tapped to another camera angle. The front hall, the stairs, the office door. And there it was, my home office door, usually locked, cracked open. My filing cabinet sat against the wall, and even through the grainy footage, I could see the drawer sitting crooked, like someone had forced it with a tool. Malcolm hadn't just brought a woman into my house. He had gone looking for paper. He had been hunting for leverage. I exhaled slowly. In my line of work, speed is temptation and patience is power. Malcolm wanted me emotional. He wanted me loud. He wanted me to storm in like a betrayed wife, so he could call me unstable and point to my anger like evidence. I wasn't going to give him that. I watched the live feed a little longer. Malcolm poured more scotch, too heavy, like he wanted to drown something. He handed the glass to the girl. She didn't drink for the taste. She drank for the message. Expensive, masculine victory. Malcolm stood behind her and stared into the camera with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Some people think they can keep a man trapped, he said. But a man always finds his way out. My fingers tightened around my phone. Not hard. Just enough to remind myself I was real and present, not watching my life through glass. I looked down at my hands. No ink, no smudge, no proof I'd signed anything. So where was his confidence coming from? A chill traced the back of my neck, slow and deliberate. Some victories are celebrated before they're earned. Some are celebrated because the person celebrating doesn't understand what they actually stole. I unlocked my burner phone. Yes, I have one. In my world, you learn to keep a second door and tapped one name. Attorney Kendra Vaughn. It rang once, twice. She answered with her usual calm, like she'd been expecting the call. Aaliyah, she said, tell me you're not calling to chat. No, I said, watching Malcolm lift his glass again. I'm calling because Malcolm thinks he just won half my empire. A pause, sharp as a blade. Where are you? Outside my gate, I said, and there's a stranger in my chair wearing my jewelry. Kendra didn't gasp. She didn't ask if I was okay. She understood, the way real friends do, that comfort is a luxury you earn after the threat is contained. Do not go in alone, she said. Do not touch anything, and do not give him the reaction he's shopping for. I wasn't planning to, I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. Good, Kendra said. Tonight, you're going to let him believe he's in control, but you're going to control the rules? I stared at the bright windows of my house, at Malcolm's silhouette moving behind them like he owned the air. I felt something inside me settle, not like surrender, but like a lock clicking into place. Okay, I said, let him toast. Because tomorrow, when he tries to turn paper into power, he's going to learn what a family trust really means. If you're still with me, don't go anywhere. The worst part of this story doesn't happen in my living room. It happens after the hangover, when Malcolm thinks he can enforce what he doesn't own. Tap like if you've ever had to stay calm while someone disrespected you, and tell me in the comments what time it is for you and where you're listening from. I stayed outside the gate for another minute, watching the light in my living room pulse as if my house had a heartbeat of its own. Kendra's instructions played in my ear like a metronome. Don't go in, don't touch, don't react. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and let the air conditioning cool the heat off my skin. Then I did something I've trained myself to do in every crisis. I rewound the tape. Because nights like this don't start with scotch and a stranger in your chair. They start with small permissions you didn't realize you were granting. They start with a man learning which parts of you are soft and which parts are simply quiet. My name is Aaliyah Pierce. I'm 32, born and raised in Florida, and I run a crisis management firm called Pierce Meridian Risk. My job is to walk into other people's worst days and make them survivable. Corporate leaks, executive scandals, lawsuits that hit the news before the ink dries. I've sat across from CEOs who swear they're innocent and politicians who swear they're sorry. I know what panic smells like. I know what lies sound like when they're practiced. And I know the most dangerous thing a person can have is certainty without facts. When I met Malcolm, he was charming in the way men can be charming when they haven't yet realized you're not impressed. He worked in sales, then nothing glamorous, but he wore ambition like cologne. We met at a rooftop mixer in Wynwood during Art Week, the kind of event where everyone pretends they're there for the paintings when they're really there for the connections. He introduced himself like he was already a success story. I'm building something, he told me, holding his drink like a microphone. I'm not meant to work for other people. I liked that he was hungry. I didn't know hunger, untreated, turns into greed. Our early days were easy. Malcolm texted good mornings. He opened doors. He listened when I talked about work, nodding like he understood, even when his eyes glazed over at words like compliance and exposure. He made me laugh. And after years of being the competent one in every room, I let myself enjoy being looked at like I was simply a woman. We married fast, which is something older women always warn you about. But I wasn't naive, I was just tired. Tired of dating men who treated my independence like a challenge. Tired of explaining that my ambition wasn't a threat. Malcolm, at first, felt like a partner. My father didn't share my optimism. He'd spent his career in finance, and before he passed, he taught me the difference between love and liability. He'd created the Pierce family trust years earlier, long before Malcolm existed in my world. The trust held my Brickell home, a lake house in Georgia, and a chunk of my long-term investments assets that needed to be insulated from lawsuits, opportunists, and whatever storms life delivered. People don't rob you with guns, Lee. He used to say he called me Lee when I was little. They rob you with paperwork. When Malcolm proposed, my father was polite. He shook Malcolm's hand. He smiled. Then, in private, he made one thing clear: the trust stays. Malcolm signed the acknowledgement 2 months before our wedding. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't even insulting. It simply stated that certain assets were separate, owned by a legal entity, not by me personally, and not by the marriage. Malcolm read it, scoffed, and signed with a flourish. "Fine," he said, kissing my forehead afterward. "Your dad's paranoid. I'm not here for your money." At the time, I believed him. The first year of marriage, Malcolm still kept his job. He complained about his boss, about commissions, about being capped. He talked about starting his own thing, an online course, a consulting brand, a crypto fund, a podcast. He collected ideas the way some people collect shoes. Lots of pairs, never worn. I didn't mind at first. I supported the dreaming. I paid for a branding workshop. I paid for a camera package when he said he wanted to shoot content. I paid for a course on high-ticket coaching. I told myself that investing in him was investing in us. Then he quit his job without telling me. I found out because his direct deposit stopped. One week, our joint account didn't get that extra boost on Friday, and when I asked, he waved it off like I was being dramatic. "I'm done making other people rich," he said. "I'm going to focus on building." Building. The word sounded noble. In reality, Malcolm woke up later, spent more time at the gym, and talked in circles about energy and alignment. When I came home from 12-hour days, he was often on the couch watching videos about entrepreneurship, nodding along as if he were in class. He'd look up when I walked in, smile, and say, "Babe, I'm really close." Close to what I never knew. Still, I tried to be patient. I hired a housekeeper to take pressure off both of us. I kept my voice soft when I asked about his plans. I didn't want to become the wife who nags. I didn't want to become my mother, who carried her marriage like a burden she couldn't set down. But the shift happened anyway. It was subtle at first. Malcolm started calling my clients "your people," like they were a separate species. He began to complain that my work made me cold. He'd say I looked through him, not at him. He'd accuse me of loving my company more than I loved him. And then, when my firm landed a major contract with a defense tech client, an account that required strict confidentiality, Malcolm's resentment found a sharper edge. "You're always guarding something," he said one night, standing in our kitchen while I reviewed documents on my tablet. Passwords, NDAs, meetings behind closed doors. "It's like you don't trust me." I looked at him and kept my voice even. "It's not about trusting you. It's about protecting my clients." He laughed, but it wasn't kind. "Right, your clients." That was the first time I felt the cold warning in my gut. Not fear, not heartbreak, just recognition. Malcolm didn't want a partnership. He wanted access. Around that same time, a new name started floating through our home in casual ways, the way a cigarette smell creeps into fabric before you see the smoker. Sky. He mentioned her like she was nothing. A trainer at his gym who really understood mindset. A girl who had hustle. A young woman who was building her brand. He started going to the gym earlier. He stayed longer. He began to take selfies again, smiling too wide, like he was trying to convince the camera he was still the main character. I noticed. Of course I noticed. Women always notice. We just decide, for a while, not to say anything, because saying it makes it real. Then my tennis bracelet went missing. It wasn't the most expensive piece I owned, but it was sentimental. My mother gave it to me when I got promoted to partner at my first firm. I wore it on days I needed to remember that I'd earned my place. When I realized it wasn't in my jewelry box, I tore the bedroom apart with calm hands. Malcolm stood in the doorway watching, arms crossed like an innocent bystander. "I took it to get the clasp tightened," he said. "You're always complaining it's loose." I didn't remember complaining, but I let it go. Because marriage, I told myself, is built on benefit of the doubt. And because I had 1,000 other fires to put out. Then the Mercedes convertible, the one I kept covered in the garage, started showing up on the neighborhood camera logs at odd hours. Little blips, the garage door opening, the car leaving, coming back, always when I was out, always when Malcolm claimed he was running errands. That's when I asked my assistant, Jay, to quietly pull the joint account history. J. Janelle Brooks on paper has been with me for 5 years. She's the kind of woman who can run a board meeting, book a private jet, and still remember your mother's birthday. She's efficient, loyal, and allergic to drama, which means if she looks worried, the problem is already serious. She came into my office late one afternoon with a folder held tight against her chest. "Aaliyah," she said, voice low, "I think Malcolm's moving money." I didn't blink. "How much?" She opened the folder and slid it across my desk. The transfers started small. Test amounts. A few $100s, then a little more, like someone checking if a door is locked. Then, 3 days earlier, a larger move enough to make my jaw tighten, but not enough to trigger an automatic call from the bank. $40,000. The memo line said, "Consulting." Jay's eyes met mine. It went into a new account at Gulf Coast Federal. "Only in his name?" I asked. Jay shook her head once, joint, with someone named Sky Redding. That was the moment the story stopped being about marriage problems and became what I understand best. A hostile takeover. So when Malcolm marched into my home office this morning with those papers and that smug smile, he wasn't improvising. He was executing a plan that had been building for months, funded by my patience and my silence. And now, tonight, he was celebrating at my table, in my house, with my stolen bracelet glittering on another woman's wrist, thinking a signature was all he needed to make himself a king. Outside the gate, I stared at the bright square of my living room window and let one thought settle like a stone in water. Malcolm didn't know who he married, but he was about to. Not because I was ruthless, because I was prepared. In my world, the quiet woman in the corner is usually the one holding the file. I don't raise my voice to win. I raise questions. I collect timestamps. I read what people skip. Malcolm had studied motivational men online, learning how to posture and threaten and sound certain. I had studied consequences. That's what he never understood about me. I don't chase. I don't beg. I don't perform. I build systems legal, digital, financial, that keep moving even when someone tries to wedge a crowbar into the hinges. I watched the live feed one last time. Malcolm lifted his glass. Sky laughed. The diamonds flashed. "Enjoy your toast," I whispered. Tomorrow the paperwork would start bleeding. Then I drove away, already choosing the next move. By sunrise, Malcolm had already moved the goalposts. At 6:04 a.m., my phone flashed with a single line. "We need to talk about the paperwork." No good morning. No apology for prying open a filing cabinet. No mention of the fact that he'd used my home office like a motel lobby walk-in. Take what you want, leave the mess for someone else. I sat at my kitchen island with a black coffee that had gone cold, reading that text as if it were a threat assessment. Outside the glass wall, Brickell was waking up. Joggers in neon, cars sliding over wet streets, the bay a sheet of hammered silver. The city looked clean. My life did not. I typed back one word: tonight. Then I got dressed like I was going to war, because in my world, war doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it arrives in a navy suit with a wedding ring and a smile. When I walked into my home office, the air felt off. Not just the smell stale cologne, that sugary alcohol breath Malcolm always masked with mints, but the way the room looked slightly rearranged, like an intruder had tried to return furniture to its correct place without ever knowing what correct was. The oak door had been left ajar. My chair was turned to face the window. A yellow legal pad sat on my desk, covered in Malcolm's handwriting. Circles, arrows, numbers that didn't add up. It looked like a man trying to prove he mattered by force of ink. The filing cabinet lock was ruined. The metal was bent where someone had pried it with a screwdriver. I ran a finger along the warped edge and felt the anger settle into my chest. Not hot, not shaky, just solid. Marriage doesn't teach you who someone is. It teaches you what they feel entitled to. I didn't touch the papers he'd scattered. I didn't straighten the drawer. I left everything exactly as it was and took pictures from 3 angles, because sometimes the quiet woman wins by being a historian. Then I turned and walked out. At Pierce Meridian Risk, the lobby smelled like citrus and expensive calm. The receptionist smiled, and I nodded back like I wasn't carrying a small private hurricane behind my ribs. My office was glass-walled, but the blinds could turn it into a bunker. I closed them the moment I stepped inside. Jay was already there, waiting at the edge of my desk with that careful posture she uses when she's about to deliver bad news. "Aaliyah," she said softly, "before you log in, you need to see this." She handed me a folder. Inside was the joint account transaction history, updated through midnight. Malcolm had made 3 transfers after I went to sleep. Not small tests this time. Confident moves, like a man packing a bag before he announces he's leaving. My jaw tightened. Where did it go? Jay tapped her tablet and turned the screen toward me. Same destination, Gulf Coast Federal. Joint account, Malcolm Pierce and Sky Redding. The name sat on my desk like a dead insect. I stared at it until my brain stopped trying to soften it. Sky Redding, 23, fitness influencer, personal trainer. The kind of girl who calls herself a wellness architect and posts sunrise affirmations over pictures of her own waist. Jay swiped to a profile page. There she was, bright smile, smooth skin, captions that sounded like therapy and marketing had a baby. Jay zoomed in on a photo taken 2 days ago. Sky held a green juice and tilted her wrist toward the camera. Diamonds. My diamonds. Mistress wearing my jewelry, I said, and my voice came out flat, like I was reading a weather report. Jay's throat bobbed. And there's more. She swiped again. Sky in a car. Beige leather interior. The dash panel with that particular strip of wood trim I'd picked because it looked like old boats. My Mercedes convertible. The one Malcolm claimed he never touched. Sky's caption read, "Convertible life. Good men spoil." I exhaled through my nose. No tears, no shaking. Heartbreak implies loss. This wasn't loss. This was trespassing. He's not just cheating, I said. He's financing his exit with my money. And he paid his lawyer with the joint account. Jay added, almost like she couldn't believe it. 5,000, retainer, yesterday. I let out a short laugh that held no humor. He paid the man he hired to sue me with my own money. Jay watched me carefully. Do you want me to freeze the account? Not yet, I thought. Not yet. If I shut the door too early, he finds another hole. No, I said. Leave it. Let him think he's ahead. Jay's shoulders loosened slightly, like she'd been holding her breath for my reaction. That's the thing about being the strong one. People watch you the way they watch a dam, waiting to see if you'll crack. I looked at the folder again. Get Darius down here, I said. I want a full forensic scrape. Every email, every text, every login from our home network. If Malcolm used the Wi-Fi, I want to know what he searched for, who he messaged, what he downloaded. Thanks for watching, Jay nodded once. And your attorney? I glanced at the burner phone in my bag. Kendra already knows. But I'm not calling her again until I have more than feelings. I want facts. Jay left, moving fast. I sat down and opened my laptop, the one I keep encrypted like a vault. For a moment, the office was quiet enough for me to hear the building's ventilation hum. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. I looked calm. That wasn't an act. That was training. People assume the worst part of betrayal is the ache. For me, the worst part is the clarity. The moment you realize the person beside you has been studying you like a map. My phone buzzed again. Malcolm. Reminder, 7 p.m. Sign and we keep this private. Private. Another costume word. He wanted privacy for the same reason thieves prefer dark streets. I didn't respond. By 10:15 a.m., Darius Cole walked into my office like a man entering a crime lab. He's my chief information security officer, the kind of person who speaks in short sentences because he lives in systems that don't tolerate emotional punctuation. Today he wore a hoodie, headphones around his neck, and a look that said he'd skipped breakfast to chase a problem. Jay closed the blinds again. Darius dropped his laptop on my desk and opened a terminal window. "Home network," he said. "You want activity logs?" "I want everything," I said, "especially anything linked to my home office workstation." Darius's fingers moved. Lines of code flickered. "A quiet storm. Your home office has remote access disabled," he said after a moment. "Unless someone changed the settings." Alrighties. Could Malcolm change settings? Darius glanced up. "If he had your admin credentials." "I don't share them." Darius made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "No one shares them. They leak." That landed heavier than it should have. Because I knew my own habits. I knew my own exhaustion. I knew the nights I'd come home late, kicked off heels, answered one last urgent message, and left my laptop open because I was too tired to close a lid. The door is always easiest to break when you're sure it's locked. Darius kept digging. His eyes narrowed. "There's a pattern," he said, "from your home IP. Early mornings, 5 to 6. That's when your system tries to authenticate to secure client files." My mouth went dry. "That's when I leave for work." Darius nodded. "Someone is in your office when you're not." The words didn't shock me. They confirmed what my gut already knew. Malcolm wasn't just angry. He was strategic in the way mediocre men become strategic when they smell money. "What's he accessing?" I asked. Darius's jaw tightened. "Your Defense Tech client folder. The one with restricted data." I felt a cold line run straight through me. That contract Hollis Aeronautics wasn't just lucrative. It was sensitive. The kind of client that doesn't forgive mistakes. The kind that brings lawsuits and investigations, not just bad press. "Shut it down," I said immediately. Darius's fingers flew. "I'm trying. It's weird. The requests are bouncing through an emergency test command." "What does that mean?" Jay asked. "It means someone can trigger a drill," Darius said. "A simulation. A ghost protocol. It mimics a breach to measure response time." My blood chilled. "And someone triggered it?" Darius looked at me. "Yes." "From inside your network." Jay's face went pale. "Is data leaking?" Darius stared at his screen, then shook his head once. "No actual exfiltration. The alarm is artificial, but the trigger is real." It hit me like a perfectly placed punch. It wasn't about stealing data. It was about making me panic. Because when I panic, I move. When I move, I leave the thing I was protecting. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back. "My house," I said. Darius's eyes tracked mine. "If someone wants to distract you, that's the cleanest method. You'd rush home, you'd stop thinking about money, and start thinking about federal trouble." Jay grabbed her keys. "I'll call security." "No," I snapped, then softened my voice. "Not yet. Not police. Not building security. If we overreact, we make noise. Noise is what he wants." I was already moving, grabbing my bag, my keys, my burner phone. My heartbeat didn't feel like fear. It felt like acceleration. I drove back to Brickell like the streets were optional. Red lights blurred. The world outside my windshield narrowed to one thing: the front door of my house. When I pulled into my driveway, Malcolm's BMW was gone. The house looked normal, clean lines, warm light, palm shadows rippling over the white exterior. Normal as a costume houses wear when something rotten is happening inside. I ran to the office. The door was closed now. I opened it with my thumbprint. The computer screen was dark. No file transfers. No open documents. No obvious evidence of anything. For a moment, my brain tried to convince me Darius had been wrong. Then I saw the painting above the side cabinet, the one of the ocean at dusk. The frame was slightly crooked. My stomach sank. Behind that painting was a safe. I crossed the room and lifted the frame with careful fingers. The safe door hung open. Empty. My emergency cash gone. My passport gone. And in the corner of the shelf, a small velvet box that used to hold my mother's ring. Gone. The room tilted. Not with dizziness, but with comprehension. He had timed it perfectly. Trigger the alarm, send me running, slip in through the side door with the spare key he'd stolen from my purse months ago, empty the safe, leave before I arrived. I walked to the window. Outside, my neighbor Miss Loretta Gaines was watering her plants, humming like the morning was innocent. She looked up when she saw me. "Baby, you all right?" she called. I stepped onto the patio. "Miss Gaines," I said. keeping my voice calm. "Did you see Malcolm come back here this morning?" Her brows knit. "He sure did. About 20 minutes ago. Came in like he was in a hurry. Came out quick, carrying a metal box. Looked real pleased with himself. Metal box. My safe cash box, my hands curled into fists at my sides." "Did he say anything?" I asked. She shook her head. Just laughed. Like something funny happened. Then he sped off. I thanked her and went back inside. The office smelled like him now, like cologne and entitlement. I sat on the floor for a second, back against the wall, letting the anger reshape itself into something sharper. This wasn't a messy divorce threat anymore. This was theft. And it was planned. I texted Darius. Ghost protocol was decoy. Safe is emptied. Passport missing. Don't move on anything yet. Keep logging. Then I called Kendra Vaughn. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me." "He triggered a drill," I said. "A fake breach to lure me home. He cleaned out my safe." A pause. I could almost hear her mind flipping through statutes like pages. "Okay," she said. "Listen to me. Do not confront him about the safe. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because he'll hide the cash and claim it never existed. We want him confident, we want him sloppy." I stared at the empty safe shelf and swallowed. Kendra continued, voice steady. "Meet me at noon, Coconut Grove, the little bistro on Tiger Tail. Bring the papers he gave you. Bring whatever evidence you have so far." "And Aaliyah?" "Yes?" "Your husband tried to take your house. That's his story. We're going to make sure the law tells a different one." By the time I got to the bistro, I'd fixed my face into its public shape. The place smelled like espresso and sea salt. The kind of restaurant where people talk about wellness while ordering bread. Kendra sat at a corner table in a cream blazer that probably cost more than Malcolm's car payment. She looked up as I approached, eyes sharp, lips pressed in a line that said she'd already decided what kind of ending this would have. I slid into the chair across from her and laid the papers on the table. Kendra didn't touch them yet. She watched me instead. "How are you holding up? I'm not breaking," I said. "If that's what you mean." A hint of approval flickered in her eyes. "Good. Now let's talk about what he actually did." She put on reading glasses and scanned the documents. Her mouth twitched. "This is template garbage," she said. "He downloaded this. Look, community property references. Florida isn't California, and even if it were, your trust overrides his fantasies." I pointed to the paragraph where the trust name appeared. He included it. Kendra nodded slowly. "That's the interesting part." She tapped her nail against the trust line. "Your assets are titled to the Pierce family trust. You're the beneficiary, but the trust is the legal owner." "I know. Does Malcolm know?" "He signed the acknowledgements." Kendra leaned back. "Then he knows. Which means if he's presenting a document demanding you personally transfer a trust asset to him, he's asking you to help him commit fraud. If you sign, it doesn't transfer anything." I finished. "Correct," she said. "It's a dud, but he will treat it like a weapon. He will try to enforce it. He will claim ownership. He might even try to list it and sell it." My stomach tightened. "He already mentioned a buyer." Kendra's eyes narrowed. "Did he say that in writing?" "No, but he will." "Then we encourage him to," Kendra said softly. The word encourage made my skin prickle. It sounded like cruelty. It sounded like bait. "You're telling me to let him think he's winning," I said. "I'm telling you to let him step over the line," Kendra replied. "A man like Malcolm doesn't learn from a lecture. He learns from consequences. The law is a room full of doors. He's already chosen which one he wants to kick down. We're just going to make sure there's a camera on the handle." I stared at her, feeling the strange calm that comes when a plan clicks into place. "But what if he escalates?" I asked. "What if he takes more?" Kendra's voice didn't change. "We are going to lock down your accounts the moment the trap is sprung. We're going to document everything. And we're going to put him on the record trying to steal property he has no legal claim to." She slid her phone across the table. "From now on, you communicate in writing when possible. You do not threaten. You do not insult. You ask clarifying questions. You let him talk." I glanced down at her screen. She'd already drafted an email subject line. "Clarification requested transfer of trust-held property." The words looked clinical, almost funny, almost. Kendra sipped her espresso. "Tonight, he wants a signature." He wants you scared enough to trade your dignity for privacy. He thinks you'll sign because you're protecting your reputation. I didn't answer. Because it was true. My reputation isn't just personal, it's the scaffolding that holds my company's valuation. Hollis Aeronautics didn't hire me because they liked my smile. They hired me because they trust my discretion. A public divorce mess could spook clients, rattle investors, make journalists sniff around my files. Malcolm knew that. He'd studied my vulnerabilities like they were instructions. Kendra watched my face. "You're thinking about the company," she said. "I'm thinking about the collateral." Kendra nodded. "Good. Now let's control it." She pulled out a slim folder of her own and slid it toward me. "This is your plan for the next 12 hours. You will go home at 6:55 p.m. You will behave as if you are tired and cornered. You will bring the documents. You will sign." The word sign landed like ice. "You're sure?" I asked. Kendra's eyes didn't blink. "Yes. Because the signature is not a surrender. It is an invitation. But you will do it carefully." "Carefully how?" "You do not sign anything that gives him legitimate access to your business," Kendra said. "No passwords. No account numbers. No operational authority. If the document demands that, we cross it out and initial the changes. If he refuses, we pivot." "And if he's recording me?" I asked. Kendra's mouth curved slightly. "Let him. Truth is a better recording than performance." She leaned in. "Aaliyah, listen. Tonight, he will try to provoke you. He will call you cold. He will call you selfish. He will call you a workaholic who neglected him. He needs you to react so he can paint himself as the victim." I swallowed. "What do I do?" Kendra's voice softened, not with sympathy, but with strategy. "You stay boring. You keep your tone flat. You say things like, 'I want to be clear,' and 'help me understand.' You make him explain his demands. You make him say what he plans to do. If you can get him to admit he intends to sell, even better. And if he tries to touch you..." I froze. Kendra's eyes hardened. "If he tries to touch you, you leave. Immediately. You don't fight. You don't stay. You walk out, and you call me." I nodded once. My throat felt tight, but my hands were steady. Kendra finished her coffee. "One more thing," she said. "Do you have a backup phone?" I patted my bag. "Burner?" "Good," she said. "Because men like Malcolm love to destroy evidence when they see it." The sun had shifted by the time I left Coconut Grove, turning the palm leaves into sharp green blades. I drove back to my office and walked into the building like nothing had happened. Jay looked up, reading my face, but I gave her a small nod. "Darius is still logging," she said, "and he found something else." "What?" Jay lowered her voice. "Malcolm searched how to sell a house held in trust from your home Wi-Fi last week. He also searched eviction notice spouses and squatters' rights Florida." My lips parted slightly. The audacity. Again. The stupidity. He wasn't just cheating and stealing. He was planning to evict me from my own life. That afternoon, I moved through my office like a ghost wearing lipstick. I signed documents, took calls, smiled at investors. Under the desk, my knee bounced once, then stilled. Jay set a small evidence bag beside my keyboard. The bent screwdriver she'd found in our kitchen drawer at home, still dusted with metal shavings from my cabinet lock. Malcolm's prints would be there if we needed them. I didn't. I only needed his confidence. I slipped the tool into my bag. Anger quiet, waiting. Outside, elevators chimed like warning bells, and I kept my face calm for the watchers. "Save everything," I said. Jay nodded. "And..." Darius found an outbound message to a realtor. My heart beat once, hard. Which realtor? Jay handed me her tablet. An email address, a name, a Miami developer group that buys old properties, knocks them down, builds glass towers, sells the view. Kendra had been right. He was already moving. I stared at the screen and let the word trap become something real. All afternoon, I worked like I always do, calls, meetings, decisions, while a second, quieter meeting ran underneath everything. My private meeting with myself about what I was willing to lose and what I refused to. At 4:40 p.m., Malcolm called. I didn't answer. At 5:12, he texted, "I hope you're being smart." At 5:45, he sent another, "This doesn't have to be ugly." Ugly, I thought, is a man prying open a cabinet with a screwdriver and calling it partnership. At 6:30, I left the office. Jay watched me gather my bag, my folder, my burner phone. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. "He thinks he's the hunter," I said. "Tonight we let him walk into the snare." Jay's eyes shone with something like pride and fear mixed together. "Call me if you need anything." "I will," I said. The drive home felt longer than it was. Miami traffic always acts like the city is late for something. The sky over the bay turned bruised purple, then deepened into velvet. My palms stayed relaxed on the wheel. I breathed slowly, counting inhale and exhale like I was preparing for a presentation. Because that's what tonight was. A presentation of Malcolm's true character, delivered in his own words. At 6:55 p.m., I pulled into my driveway. The house was dim, but there was a warm flicker behind the curtains. Candles, I could smell them through the car window when I stepped out. Expensive, floral, like someone trying to disguise rot with perfume. When I opened the front door, the sight stopped me for half a second. The dining room table was set with my grandmother's china. Not the everyday plates. The real ones. White porcelain with a thin gold rim, the kind you don't use unless you respect what you're serving. On those plates sat cardboard takeout boxes. Cheap Chinese food, grease soaking through paper, sweet and sour sauce staining the edges like blood. The metaphor was so perfect it felt deliberate. Malcolm stood at the end of the table in a tuxedo. He looked like he was auditioning for a role he didn't understand. He smiled as if we were about to renew vows. "You're late," he said. "Traffic." I lied. He waved a hand, already forgiving me because tonight he believed he held power. "Sit," he said, pouring wine into a crystal glass. My crystal. I sat. I placed my purse beside my chair. Inside, the burner phone was ready. My real phone. I'd left in my car. Off. I wasn't going to give Malcolm anything he could dunk into water. He paced while he talked, circling the table like a shark that had watched too many motivational videos. "I've been thinking," he said, "about us." I kept my face neutral. "About us?" "Yes," he said, as if I'd asked a dumb question. "About my trajectory, my potential. You have held me back, Aaliyah." I didn't answer. I let him fill the silence, because silence is bait, and Malcolm loved to bite. "I've been living in your shadow," he continued. "People call me Mr. Pierce Meridian. They don't know my name. They just know I'm your husband. Nobody calls you that," I said softly. His jaw tightened. "You see? That dismissive tone. That's why this marriage doesn't work. You've been so obsessed with your career that you forgot you married a man with ambition. Thanks for watching." I took a small bite of food and chewed slowly. It tasted like salt and irony. "I supported your ambition," I said, keeping my voice even. "I paid for the courses, the camera, the branding workshop." "Those were stepping stones," Malcolm snapped. "I was finding my path, and now I found someone who actually believes in me." I looked up. Sky. His eyes flickered. A fraction. A tell. Then his smile returned. "Sky understands masculine energy," he said. "She sees the alpha in me." Alpha. The word would have been funny if it weren't so sad. "She's young," I said, not accusing, just noting. Malcolm leaned forward, hands on the table. "She's hungry," he said. "She's building. She's not like you, cold and closed off. She knows how to be a woman." I kept my tone flat. "And she knows how to wear my jewelry." The room shifted. Malcolm's posture froze for a split second. Then he laughed, too loudly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The tennis bracelet," I said. "The one you took for repairs." His smile tightened at the edges. "You've been stalking me," he said, turning the accusation like a blade. "This is why you're toxic. You don't trust. You spy." I lifted my wineglass and took a sip. "Help me understand," I said calmly. "If I'm wrong, then whose diamonds are on her wrist?" Malcolm's eyes flashed with anger, but he swallowed it. He wanted control. Tonight was his stage. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folder of documents. He slid it toward me like a dealer sliding cards. "Sign," he said. "We can end this without court. You keep the business well. Half of it, and I take the physical assets. The house. The lake house. The vehicles. It's fair. Fair." Another costume word. I opened the folder slowly, as if I were reading it for the first time. I already knew every line. I still pretended. This says immediate possession, I said. Yes, Malcolm replied, pleased with himself. It means once you sign, I take control. Tonight. Tonight, I repeated, letting the word hang. Malcolm took it as agreement. Exactly. I've already talked to a buyer, he said casually, as if discussing groceries. A developer. He wants to tear the house down and build condos. I'll use the cash to launch my fund. My pulse didn't change, but inside, something sharpened. You want to tear it down, I said, very softly. It's real estate, Malcolm said, shrugging. Sentimental nonsense doesn't matter. Money matters. I looked at him. So you're saying you intend to sell the property? Yes, he said, leaning back smug. As soon as the ink dries. That's the point. There it was. Not a threat. Not an implication. An admission. I felt Kendra's voice in my ear. Make him say it. I set the folder down. Just so I'm clear, I said, keeping my tone smooth. You're telling me if I don't sign, you will file for a contested divorce and make allegations that could damage my business. Malcolm smiled, satisfied. I'm telling you I'll protect my interests. If you force my hand, I'll go public. I'll tell the court you neglected me, that you were abusive, that you hoarded money. People will listen, Aaliyah. People love a story about an ice queen getting what she deserves. Ice queen. His favorite insult because it made my restraint sound like cruelty instead of intelligence. I nodded slowly, as if considering. And if I sign, you'll keep it private. Yes, he said. We settle. Clean, civil. I reached into my purse and pulled out my burner phone, holding it casually in my palm. I'd opened the voice memo app before I walked in. A small red dot pulsed. Malcolm's eyes locked onto it. I kept my voice calm. I just want to make sure I understand your terms, I said, so there's no confusion later. His face changed, the way a mask slips when it realizes it's being watched. You're recording me, he said, voice low. It's for clarity, I said. Malcolm's smile vanished. He moved fast, too fast. He reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. His grip was tight, fingers digging into bone. Pain shot up my arm like electricity. Stop, I said, my voice still controlled but sharper now. He twisted my hand until the phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the table. He snatched it up like it was evidence of a crime. You think you're so smart, he hissed. You think you can trap me. My heart hammered once, not from fear of him, from the realization that he was willing to hurt me, to control the narrative. He walked to the sideboard where a crystal pitcher of ice water sat. He dropped the phone into it. Plunk. The screen lit up underwater, then went black. There, he said, turning back with a smile that looked almost childish. No more evidence. I stared at the dead phone in the water. A small part of me mourned the clean simplicity of that recording. It would have made everything easier, but I didn't move. Malcolm stepped closer, towering over me as if height could create authority. Now, he whispered, it's your word against mine. And I'm charming, Aaliyah. People like me, clients like me, juries like me. If we go to court, I'll paint you as the frigid workaholic who drove her loving husband into another woman's arms. His breath smelled like mints and old alcohol. I looked at him and saw the truth. Malcolm didn't want money because he needed it. He wanted money because he believed it proved he mattered. He believed ownership could manufacture dignity. I let my shoulders slump slightly. I let my eyes soften. I let him see what he wanted to see. A woman cornered. You win, I said, and I made my voice tremble just enough to sound real. I can't risk my company. Malcolm's face relaxed. Victory softened him like warm wax. That's a smart girl, he murmured, tossing me the pen. I sat down slowly. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Every stroke I made was deliberate, careful, a signature placed like a chess piece. Aaliyah Pierce. Initials. Date. Again. Again. Malcolm watched, breathing heavier, as if each line of ink fed him. When I finished, I pushed the papers back across the table. Done, I said. Malcolm snatched them up and flipped through, checking each page like a man counting cash. Then he grinned. See? He said. Was that so hard? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring of keys. My house keys? He dangled them between two fingers like a trophy. Immediate possession, he said, savoring the words. So, you need to leave. Now. I looked at him. It's 8 o'clock. So? He shrugged. You have money. Get a hotel. This is my house. He nodded toward the door, toward the life he believed he'd taken. Leave the Mercedes keys on the table, he added. Take an Uber. I slid the car keys from my purse and placed them on the china plate, right next to a smear of sauce. I stood up. I picked up my bag. Goodbye, Malcolm, I said. He turned away already, reaching for the scotch bottle on the counter. Don't forget to close the gate, he called, like he was doing me a favor. I walked out into the night air and felt the humidity hit my skin like a hand. The sky over Miami was dark and low, the city lights reflecting off clouds like bruises. I didn't call an Uber. I walked down the driveway, past the gate, and around the corner where Kendra Vaughn waited in a black sedan with the engine running, her face lit by the dashboard glow. When I opened the passenger door and slid inside, she didn't ask me if I was okay. She asked the only question that mattered. Did he take the bait? She said. I stared out at my own house, the warm lights behind the curtains, the silhouettes moving inside like ghosts. Yes, I said softly, he thinks he won. Kendra's mouth curved, not into a smile, but into a line that promised consequence. Good, she said. Then she handed me a second phone. Now we start the part he didn't plan for. Kendra drove like she'd done this before, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on her phone as if it were a weapon. Miami slid past. I watched my own street disappear in the side mirror and felt something inside me unclench. You did exactly what you needed to do, Kendra said. I signed, I replied. He destroyed my recorder. That's fine, she said, eyes forward. A man who destroys evidence usually creates more. She handed me the second phone again, the one with no contacts except two, Jay and Darius. From this moment on, she said, your world has two lanes, the lane Malcolm sees and the lane we operate in. I nodded. In my business, you don't win by being louder. You win by being earlier. I looked down at my wedding ring. The diamond caught a streetlight and flashed the way it had flashed the day Malcolm slid it on my finger and promised we'd be a team. For a second, I felt something that almost resembled grief, not for him, but for the version of myself who thought love could outvote paperwork. I slipped the ring into my pocket anyway, not because it mattered legally, because I wanted my hand to feel like my own again. Kendra didn't comment. She never wasted words on symbolism. Tonight is documentation, she said. Tomorrow is enforcement. We checked into the Street Regis in Ball Harbor under my name, but not my usual reservation profile. Kendra had done it through a corporate concierge account that didn't connect back to my firm. The suite on the 22nd floor looked out over the ocean, a calm sheet of darkness. Inside, it didn't feel like a hotel. It felt like a command center. 2 paralegals were already waiting, laptops open, printer humming, stacks of forms neatly aligned. Jay arrived 10 minutes later, eyes wide, hair pulled back tight, carrying a banker's box of folders and a small evidence bag. Before anyone spoke, Kendra laid out the spine of the night. The trust deed printed in triplicate, the signed acknowledgement Malcolm couldn't deny, a draft emergency removal request, and a clean chain of custody sheet for every screenshot and email. It was the same way I build a crisis binder for clients' facts first, feelings later. In the center of the table sat one page with my address in bold, as if the ink itself could remind the world who had title and who had theater. Darius came in last, hoodie up, backpack slung over one shoulder. He sat up at the dining table and immediately began typing, his fingers moving with the quiet intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Kendra pointed to the wall-mounted television. Cast Malcolm's feed, she said. Jay tapped her tablet, and the screen filled with Malcolm's Instagram Live. There he was, my husband sitting in my chair like a king on a borrowed throne, a cigar in one hand, the scotch bottle in the other. Sky sat on his lap in one of my silk robes, her bare knee bouncing, as if she couldn't keep still in her own greed. Cheers to the good life, Malcolm shouted to his audience of 14. New house, new energy, no more toxic vibes. Sky leaned toward the camera and smiled, letting the diamonds speak. We love a fresh start, she purred. I watched their mouths move and felt only distance, like observing an accident through glass. Darius, I said without turning, are you ready? He didn't look up. On your command. Kendra lifted her chin at me. This was the moment where most women still tried to salvage dignity by begging. I'd already paid too much for Malcolm's comfort. Tonight, I was paying for my freedom. Execute protocol blackout, I said. Darius's fingers pressed 2 keys. Step 1, he said. Financial friction. Jay slid a folder toward him. These are the account numbers for the joint household account and the cards Malcolm has access to. And this, Jay added, voice tight, is an email Malcolm sent to a developer group. He asked about a fast sale and demolition timeline. She placed the printout beside the trust deed like a receipt next to a confession. Darius glanced at it once. Perfect, he said. That ties intent to action. He typed again. Fraud alerts now, freezing, locking, and I'm saving a full packet of network logs in case Hollis Aeronautics asks why our home IP was touching restricted folders. On the TV, Malcolm lifted his glass again, mid-sentence. The lights behind him flickered once, like the house blinked. What the? He began. Darius spoke calmly. Step 2, access revocation. He typed again. Smart home credentials are resetting. Removing Malcolm as authorized user. Converting admin to biometric only. The living room on the screen dimmed. The music Malcolm had playing cut out abruptly. Sky's smile faltered. Babe, she said, voice suddenly smaller. Did you pay the electric? Malcolm waved her off, trying to laugh. It's a glitch. My ex is dramatic. Died in a 22. Darius kept going. Wi-Fi down, gate controls locked, alarm rearmed, interior locks engaged. The live feed froze, then resumed in grainy darkness. Malcolm's face appeared as a pale oval lit by his phone screen. Hold on, he muttered to his followers. We're having technical issues. Kendra watched, expression unreadable. Step 3, she said softly. Transportation. Darius nodded. BMW lease is in your corporate name. Remote kill switch is active. Car will not start. Good, I said. Jay swallowed. What about the club membership and the gym? Cancelled, Darius said. Payment failures sent. Access revoked. On screen, Malcolm stood up, phone shaking. I'm going to check the breaker, he announced to no one. Sky slid off his lap and pulled the robe tighter. I can't even charge my phone, she complained. Darius's voice stayed level. Step 4. Paper trail. He sent the final batch of notices. Utilities, insurance, device access, and a formal letter indicating Malcolm was no longer an authorized occupant under the trust's property management policy. It wasn't the eviction yet. It was the scaffolding before the hammer. Kendra turned to me. Now we call his attorney. Jay dialed the number on speaker. It rang twice. Law office of Carlton Shears? A man answered, breathy and confident. How may I direct your call? Kendra's voice was silk. Mr. Shears, this is attorney Kendra Vaughn. I represent Aaliyah Pierce. A pause. Ah, Shears said. Yes. My client informs me the documents were signed. They were, Kendra said. We are calling to confirm your intended enforcement. Specifically, the document claiming transfer of the property at 1907 Bayfront Terrace. Excellent, Shears said. Then we can proceed with immediate possession. Kendra let the silence stretch. Mr. Shears, she said at last, did you perform a title search before drafting a transfer instrument for that property? My client represented Shears began. Kendra cut him off gently. Because if you had performed a title search, you would know my client does not own that property personally. The Pierce Family Trust owns it. The suite felt suddenly quiet. Shears cleared his throat. I wasn't informed. You were paid, Kendra said. And you drafted an instrument purporting to transfer a trust asset to your client, an individual who signed written acknowledgement of that trust prior to marriage. Kendra's voice sharpened, still calm. Your client is currently occupying trust-held property without authorization. If he attempts to list it, sell it, or prevent the trust's beneficiary from entering, that is fraud and trespass. We are filing for emergency removal and referring this matter for investigation. Shears's breathing changed. Now wait. Unless, Kendra said smoothly, you would like to explain to the Florida bar why you facilitated an attempted trust fraud. Shears spoke fast now. Hold on. I'm going to patch him in. A click sounded, then another. A new line joined the call. Kendra? Malcolm's voice came through, rough and panicked. The alpha was gone. Kendra, he said again, then corrected himself. Aaliyah. Baby, listen. I leaned toward the speaker, but kept my voice flat. Malcolm, something's wrong, he rushed. My cards aren't working. The Wi-Fi's down. The gate won't open. This is illegal. You can't do this. I live here. Kendra answered for me. You do not live there. The trust owns the property. You are an unauthorized occupant. Malcolm's breath hitched. That's a technicality. It's a felony when you use unenforceable instruments to claim ownership, Kendra said, and it becomes more serious when you attempt to dispossess the beneficiary. Malcolm's voice cracked. I didn't forge anything. She signed. She signed a document you knew could not transfer title, Kendra said. You told your attorney you owned property you didn't own. You attempted to sell it. We have the emails. Malcolm lowered his voice, trying to find charm. Aaliyah, come on. We can talk. I'll leave Sky. I'll tear up the papers. Just turn the power back on. I pictured the empty safe shelf, my missing passport, my mother's ring. No, I said quietly. He inhaled sharply. No? You wanted independence, I continued. You wanted a fresh start. You have it. There was silence on the line. Kendra spoke again, precise. You have 30 minutes to vacate trust property. You may take your clothing and personal items. If you remove anything purchased by Aaliyah Pierce or titled to the trust, we will pursue theft charges in addition to fraud. Malcolm's voice turned desperate. Where am I supposed to go? Kendra's tone didn't change. Anywhere that isn't 1907 Bayfront Terrace. The call ended. On the TV, Malcolm stumbled through the dark, phone flashlight jittering. Sky's voice rose in irritation, not concern. My Uber can't get in, she snapped, and the water is cold. Malcolm hissed something back, frantic. He tried the front door. The lock beeped and refused him. He tried again, same beep. I watched, not with pleasure, but with the satisfaction of a structure working as designed. Kendra turned to me. Now everything will look sudden to him, she said, but it wasn't. Every choice he made is written into the ending. Darius finally looked up. Fraud flags are live. If Malcolm tries another transfer, the bank freezes it automatically. Jay exhaled. Deputy Harris is scheduled for 10 a.m. Emergency removal request filed. Trust deed attached. Clean. Kendra nodded. Morning is the part where he learns the difference between confidence and ownership. I walked to the window and looked down at the black water. The city lights shimmered, distant and indifferent. Behind me, Malcolm's live feed cut out completely. The screen went dark. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel like danger. It felt like space. And in that space, I understood the truth that always arrives after a storm. The most powerful revenge isn't rage. It's receipts. I didn't sleep. I watched the ocean shift from black to pewter and let the sweet silence do its work. Darius kept his headphones on, guarding my network the way he guards any perimeter quietly, relentlessly. At 7:18 a.m., my burner phone buzzed. Miss Loretta Gaines' video. I hit play. The footage was shaky, filmed through her blinds. Malcolm stumbled out my front door in the tuxedo shirt he'd worn for his victory dinner, now wrinkled and unbuttoned. He walked toward the driveway, shoulders trying to hold a posture his life couldn't support. A tow truck was already there. The driver hooked a chain under the BMW's axle. Malcolm jogged down the steps barefoot. Hey, that's my car. Repo order, the driver said. Lease default. Unauthorized driver. I'm the owner, Malcolm yelled. Computer says terminated. The driver replied, pulling a lever. The BMW lifted and swung slightly, helpless as a shopping cart. Malcolm slapped his pockets, pulled out his phone, tapped the screen again and again. No service, just his own face reflected back at him. Sky appeared in the doorway behind him, wearing gym clothes and irritation. My Uber can't get through the gate, she called. And the water is freezing. Malcolm spun, frantic. The car is being stolen! It's being repossessed, the driver corrected, and the truck rolled forward, dragging Malcolm's status symbol away. Sky marched down the steps. Use your card and fix it, she snapped. I tried, Malcolm shouted. Everything's declined. Sky's expression changed. No heartbreak, only math. Declined, she repeated. You told me you had the settlement. Malcolm shook the signed folder like it was scripture. I own the house. It's done. Sky looked past him at the dark windows and locked gate. You don't own hot water, she said flatly. You don't own Wi-Fi. You don't own a way out of this driveway. She turned and started walking toward the street. Malcolm chased her. We'll go to my brother's. We'll regroup. The funds will clear. Sky stopped and looked back with a tired smile. What funds, Malcolm? He froze. The video ended there, with him standing in my driveway like a man waiting for a world that wasn't coming back. Kendra set a coffee beside me. 10 o'clock, she said. Deputy Harris meets us at the property. Jay looked up. Carlton Shears just emailed. He's withdrawing as counsel. Darius removed one headphone. If Malcolm touches your systems again, he trips alerts. He's cut off. Kendra's gaze stayed steady. Belief doesn't matter, she said. Title does. At 9:43, we drove back to Bayfront Terrace. My stomach was calm. Once anger becomes strategy, it stops burning and starts building. Deputy Harris was waiting at 10:01. Malcolm stood on the lawn beside 2 suitcases and a box, trying to look wronged instead of caught. She locked me out, he blurted. This is illegal. I'm her husband. I have rights. Deputy Harris took Kendra's folder, read the trust deed, the acknowledgement Malcolm signed, and the emergency removal request. He didn't rush. He simply finished reading, then looked at Malcolm. Sir, he said evenly, this property is held by the Pierce Family Trust. You are not an authorized occupant. This is trespassing on a trust asset. Malcolm blinked. But she signed. Kendra's voice was soft and sharp. Aaliyah cannot personally transfer trust-held property. You know that. You signed the acknowledgement. Malcolm's mouth opened, then closed again. Deputy Harris nodded toward the U-Haul at the curb. 10 minutes, he said. Clothing and personal items only. Anything else stays. Malcolm's eyes flicked to the front door. My computer. Corporate purchase, Kendra said. Asset tagged. My suits? Take them, I said. Leave the hangars. Malcolm moved fast, stacking as if speed could hide humiliation. His hands shook. He didn't look at me until the driver latched the U-Haul door. You'll regret this, he said hoarsely. I'll tell everyone who you are. I stepped closer. Just enough. Who am I, Malcolm? I asked. I'm the woman who funded your life and still had enough left over to document your fraud. His eyes went glassy. Aaliyah. No, I said calmly. That part of me isn't yours anymore. A smaller car pulled up his brother, Andre, a mechanic with grease under his nails and apology in his posture. He avoided my gaze as he helped Malcolm lift the last box. I'm sorry, Andre muttered. It's not your fault, I told him. Get to work. Take care of yourself. Then Sky arrived. Not in my Mercedes, in a plain Honda. She didn't get out. She rolled down the window and looked at Malcolm like he was a bad investment. Sky, babe, Malcolm rushed over. Follow us to Andre's. We'll crash there, then we… Sky laughed short, sharp, done. Crash in a basement? No. The funds, Malcolm started. You're broke, Sky cut in. And you're dumb. I looked up trust fraud. I'm not going to jail for you. She lifted her bare wrist where my bracelet used to be. I pawned it, she added. Consider it my consulting fee for wasting my time. Malcolm made a strangled sound. You pawned it? Sky shrugged. You said it was yours. Turns out nothing is. She drove off. Malcolm stood there, staring after her, then turned to me with a small, stunned voice. She pawned your bracelet. I know, I said. It was insured. Deputy Harris cleared his throat. House is clear, he said to Kendra. Kendra nodded. Thank you, Deputy. When the U-Haul rolled away, the street went quiet again. My gate opened for my fingerprint like nothing had happened. Inside, the house smelled wrong cigars, cheap perfume, someone else's entitlement. The cleaning crew moved in without speaking, erasing the night like it was a spill. Upstairs, Malcolm's side of the closet was empty, except for a few wire hangers. I unscrewed the air vent above his old shelf and pulled out a gym towel wrapped around a stack of cash. $8,000. He'd been skimming for months. Downstairs, I handed the cash to Jay. Donate it, I said. Women's shelter. In Malcolm's name, he always wanted to look generous. Jay's eyes softened. Done. 6 months passed. Malcolm's threats turned into paperwork he didn't know how to file. Kendra answered them with clean motions and colder language. The developer never touched my house. Hollis Aeronautics stayed with my firm, and my investors trusted me more after they saw how quickly I contained the mess. On a warm June night, my dining table held my grandmother's china again, but this time there were no takeout boxes. There was roast duck, lemon risotto, and wine that didn't need a screw top. Jay laughed across from me. Darius warned Andre about crypto scams. Miss Gaines critiqued my flowers like she'd always been family. Kendra raised her glass. To Aaliyah, she said, who proved the best revenge isn't loud, it's legal. We clinked glasses, and the sound felt like closure. Later, Andre leaned close. What happened to Malcolm? I took a sip. Last I heard, he's renting a studio above a bowling alley. He tried to sue his attorney. He's representing himself. Andre winced. That's rough. He chose his path, I said. I just stopped blocking the consequences. I looked out at the bay through clean glass. The gate was locked. The house was mine quiet in the best way. My life wasn't smaller without Malcolm. It was finally, completely my own. What I learned is simple, and it isn't romantic. Love without boundaries becomes a loan you never approved. If you're the woman paying the bills, keep your receipts, keep your titles, and keep your voice steady. Don't confuse silence with surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy, the calm hand that sets the trap and waits. Malcolm wanted me loud, messy, and emotional so the world could call him the victim. I stayed precise. I let the paperwork speak, and when it spoke, it sounded like freedom. Because power is safest when it's documented clearly. And if this story hit a nerve, don't just scroll away. Tap like so this channel can keep growing, and subscribe so you don't miss the next video we drop in the coming days. In the comments, tell me what time it is for you and where you're listening from, and tell me what you would have done in my place. Then click the end screen to watch another story from this channel.